The room went quiet. Experienced military officers, people who had flown and commanded advanced combat aircraft for decades, stared at the data on the screen. What they were seeing didn't match the assumptions they had trusted for years. This wasn't a simulation glitch. This wasn't a training trick. It was real performance, recorded step by step, and it forced everyone watching to rethink what they believed about modern air combat. The scenario was designed to be tough. Harsh weather, limited support, fast-changing threats, and tight reaction windows. In this environment, mistakes are punished instantly. The expectation was simple. The smaller, lighter fighter would struggle once pressure increased. Instead, the opposite happened. From the very first moments, the aircraft showed an unusual level of situational awareness. Pilots reported that information arrived faster than expected, clearer than expected, and with less workload than they were used to. Targets appeared, disappeared, and reappeared in ways that felt almost predictive. The cockpit wasn't overwhelming the pilot. It was helping the pilot think. Then came the maneuvers. In close combat scenarios, timing is everything. A half-second delay can decide the outcome. The jet responded instantly, changing direction, speed, and altitude with precision that surprised even seasoned evaluators. Observers noticed how quickly it could transition from defense to attack, often before the opposing side realized what had happened. What truly shocked the officers wasn't just agility, it was efficiency. While others burned fuel aggressively to maintain performance, this aircraft managed its energy intelligently. It stayed in the fight longer, returned to base sooner, and required less recovery time between sorties. On paper, these details might look small. In real operations, they are decisive. Electronic warfare testing raised even more eyebrows. Systems designed to confuse, blind, or overwhelm the aircraft simply didn't have the effect many expected. Instead of reacting late, the jet adapted early. Threats were detected, categorized, and countered with calm precision. One officer reportedly remarked that it felt less like flying a machine and more like working with a highly trained partner. Logistics officers also took notes. Ground crews demonstrated how quickly the aircraft could be turned around. Fewer people, less time, and simpler procedures meant higher availability. In a prolonged conflict, this kind of readiness can outweigh raw numbers or headline specifications. During debriefings, pilots from different backgrounds shared similar reactions. They expected compromises. They expected trade-offs. Instead, they found balance. High performance without excessive complexity. Advanced systems without loss of pilot control. Modern capability without dependency on massive infrastructure. By the end of the exercise, the tone had changed completely. Skepticism turned into curiosity. Curiosity turned into respect. Some officers admitted openly that they had underestimated what they were about to see. Not because it broke the laws of physics, but because it challenged outdated ideas about what a frontline fighter must be. The biggest lesson wasn't about speed, stealth, or firepower alone. It was about philosophy. Designing a combat aircraft around real-world needs, fast decision-making, and sustainable operations can produce results that statistics alone fail to explain. As the final reports were compiled, one conclusion stood out clearly. Modern air combat is no longer just about who has the biggest budget or the most complex systems. It's about smart design, intelligent integration, and giving pilots the tools they need to win before the enemy even understands what's happening. That is why the reaction was so strong. That is why the room fell silent. And that is why, long after the exercise ended, officers kept talking about what they had just witnessed. Because sometimes, one performance is enough to change the conversation entirely. At first, many of the officers treated it like just another routine evaluation. NATO exercises happen all the time, and most of the time the results confirm what everyone already believes. Bigger budgets, heavier platforms, and more complex systems usually dominate the discussion. This time, however, something very different unfolded in front of their eyes. The scenario was deliberately unforgiving. limited air support, contested airspace, electronic interference, and multiple threats appearing at once. The goal was to overload pilots, slow their reactions, and expose weaknesses. What no one expected was how calmly and efficiently the aircraft handled the chaos. From the moment it entered the exercise area, the jet seemed unusually aware of its surroundings. Pilots described the experience as seeing the fight before it happened. Data from sensors, radar, and external sources flowed together seamlessly. Instead of juggling screens and warnings, the pilot could focus on decisions. Several officers noted that reducing pilot workload in such conditions is usually impossible. Yet here, it was happening in real time. As the exercise escalated, opposing aircraft attempted to exploit speed and altitude advantages. The response was immediate. Sharp turns, sudden climbs, and precise energy management allowed the jet to stay exactly where it needed to be. It didn't chase unnecessarily, and it didn't retreat blindly. Every movement felt calculated. Observers later said it looked less like a reactive fighter and more like a chess player thinking several moves ahead. One of the most unexpected moments came during simulated missile engagements. Timing windows were extremely tight. In past exercises, even elite pilots struggled to respond fast enough. This time, reactions were almost instant. Defensive maneuvers were executed cleanly, followed by rapid counterattacks. The transition shocked those watching because it happened before the opposing side could reorganize. Electronic warfare trials were supposed to be a major challenge. Powerful jamming systems were activated, designed to confuse sensors and disrupt communications. Instead of becoming blind or overwhelmed, the aircraft adapted. Threats were identified, filtered, and prioritized without panic. Officers reviewing the data later admitted that they expected at least partial degradation. What they saw instead was stability under pressure. Fuel efficiency became another talking point. While other jets required frequent refueling or shortened missions, this aircraft stayed operational longer than predicted. It returned with reserves, not empty tanks. In real combat, this means more time on station, more flexibility, and fewer logistical risks. Several commanders quietly noted how valuable that could be in prolonged operations. On the ground, the surprises continued. Maintenance crews demonstrated turnaround procedures that were faster than most NATO standards. Fewer technicians were needed. Diagnostics were clearer. Problems were identified quickly and resolved without excessive downtime. For planners thinking about dispersed bases and limited infrastructure, this raised serious interest. During pilot debriefings, a pattern emerged. Regardless of background or experience level, pilots reported confidence. Not overconfidence, but trust. Trust that the aircraft would respond as expected. Trust that systems would support, not distract. One veteran pilot stated that this was the first time in years he felt the aircraft was truly working with him, not demanding constant attention. As discussions continued, the mood shifted. Early skepticism turned into intense questioning. How was this balance achieved? Why hadn't more attention been paid to this design philosophy before? Officers began comparing notes, not just on performance, but on sustainability. High readiness rates, lower operating stress, and consistent results mattered more than raw numbers on paper. By the final day, the conclusion was unavoidable. The exercise had exposed a gap between perception and reality. Assumptions based on size, cost, or reputation had failed to predict actual effectiveness. The aircraft didn't dominate by being the most extreme in any single category. It dominated by being smart, adaptable, and pilot-focused. One senior officer summarized it best during the closing briefing. He said that modern air combat is no longer about overwhelming complexity. It's about clarity in chaos, about making the right decision faster than the enemy, about staying operational when conditions are worst, not best. That statement lingered long after the exercise ended. Reports were filed, data was analyzed, but the conversations didn't stop. Because what NATO officers witnessed wasn't just impressive flying, it was a reminder that innovation doesn't always look the way we expect, and that is why disbelief turned into respect. Because once the numbers were verified and the footage reviewed, there was no denying it. What they had seen changed how many of them would think about air power from that moment forward. The exercise began like many others, with confidence high and expectations already set. NATO officers had seen countless fighters perform under pressure, and most believed they knew exactly how this scenario would end. The conditions were demanding by design. Limited warning time, multiple airborne threats, electronic interference, and strict mission objectives. It was meant to expose weaknesses, not create surprises. But almost immediately, something felt different. As the aircraft entered contested airspace, its response to rapidly changing threats stood out. Pilots reported that they were never chasing information. Instead, critical data appeared exactly when needed. There was no sense of overload, no confusion, only clarity. Officers watching the live feeds noticed how smoothly decisions were made, even as the situation grew more complex. When simulated enemy aircraft attempted to overwhelm it through numbers and speed, the response was calm and precise. Rather than aggressive, wasteful maneuvers, the jet chose smart positioning. It avoided unnecessary risks, conserved energy, and struck at the right moment. Observers later said it felt like watching experience defeat brute force. The biggest shock came during close-range combat drills. These scenarios usually expose limits very quickly. Reaction time, control, and pilot stress all become visible. Yet here, movements were sharp and controlled. Defensive actions flowed naturally into offensive opportunities. Several officers exchanged looks, clearly surprised by how quickly the aircraft flipped the situation in its favor. Electronic warfare testing added another layer of disbelief. Jamming and disruption were expected to degrade performance. Instead, the systems adapted. Threats were identified and managed without hesitation. The aircraft didn't panic or retreat. It adjusted and continued the mission. For planners used to seeing performance drop under such conditions, this was unexpected. Fuel usage and endurance became talking points as well. While others struggled to maintain presence without support, this jet remained effective longer than predicted. It completed its objectives and returned with margins to spare. In real-world operations, that difference could decide entire campaigns. On the ground, the efficiency continued. Turnaround times were shorter than most officers were used to seeing. Maintenance teams worked quickly and methodically, with fewer complications. The idea that high performance must always mean high logistical burden was quietly challenged. During debriefings, pilots shared a common feeling: confidence. Not arrogance, but assurance. They trusted the aircraft to respond exactly as intended. They felt supported, not distracted by its systems. One officer noted that this level of trust is rare and takes years to build with most platforms. By the end of the exercise, disbelief had turned into serious reflection. Assumptions were questioned. Old comparisons felt outdated. What stood out was not raw power or extreme specifications, but balance. A design focused on real combat conditions, fast decisions, and sustainable operations. That is why the reaction was so strong. Because what NATO officers witnessed wasn't just a good performance. It was proof that smart design and pilot-focused thinking can outperform expectations. And once that realization set in, the conversation around modern air combat began to change.